The iPhone 10, I guess, looks exactly the same as iPhone 17.
It's wild to me that in Canada, there's like 5 million people whose visas are expiring next year. We're a country of what, 40 million people? How do we import 5 million people? What are you talking about?
So corporate tax is going down, personal income tax is going up. So is this just like robbing poor and funding the rich?
Mark Carney overall is a very seasoned politician. As an individual, though, whenever I listen to him speak, nothing feels genuine.
There was also a capital gains hike that was proposed, and then the CRA started collecting them, and then now it's an election and they killed it.
But what happens when AI becomes sufficiently advanced such that anyone is able to generate content?
The tagline was literally Apple Intelligence, and it was complete flop, and up until today, Siri does not work. Okay. Welcome to the second episode of Core Life Capital. I'm here with Matt and Soham. So many great things to talk about this week. I feel like, Matt, I think there's so many news about Elon Musk in the US government. I think there has just been news, I think in the past few days, that he's planning to step down at the end of his special employee status, which is basically at the end of May. So Elon Musk obviously is a great entrepreneur, founder, and now working in Doge in the U.S. government. What are your thoughts about like how is his performance so far, and what do you think the road goes down for him from here?
Well, first of all, I think it's pretty wild that he called it Doge. I think like for him, it's such a weird situation because first of all, he's completely correct that there is an abundance of waste in government all over the place. What were they saying? They spent $1 billion on a survey about the national parks. And he's like, oh, you guys could have just used SurveyMonkey for 10K, right? It's just ridiculous. So did he do some good for taxpayers? Probably. Was it a little bit weird because he's, some of his businesses run off government subsidies? Yeah, it's a little bit strange because, Tesla's getting some subsidies for running their stuff. So I don't know. I'm a bit conflicted. I was a bit conflicted in the first place. Seems like he found some good stuff, but at the same time, there's some conflict of interest. Yeah.
Right. And so why do you think he joined Doge in the first place? Is it more because you think it's more like the government subsidies, or is it regulations, or he just genuinely interested in solving this deficit problem?
I think overall, Elon just became political because there's been so much like lawfare against him, like a lot of weaponized lawfare. I remember the case against Tesla where a Tesla shareholder with 12 shares tried to sue him over his compensation package. And then the judge allowed it, saying, yeah, this was vastly too much. He moved his entire operation to Austin then, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think he just started getting more and more into politics. And I think everyone kind of just has become happenstance with the idea that government will waste money, that government workers are lazy, they're not doing too much. You go there to kind of like a retirement type job. And that just became kind of part of our reality. And I think that's the one thing Elon's always been like a big person in, and the idea that just because something is the way it is, it doesn't mean it can't change.
Yeah, but I heard, Matt, like there's like a few days ago, there was this podcast on Bloomberg, and I was listening in, and they were saying that Elon didn't know that he's actually the fall guy for the Trump administration if something does go wrong in Doge. And maybe he's not aware of that. So because now I think like there's a lot of public backlash towards Elon Musk, not that much towards the president. So do you think this assessment is like practically right? Is he just setting himself up to be the fall guy, that he's not aware that he's potentially in danger politically?
I mean, I don't think it's good. Like even if he is the fall guy, what's going to happen to him? Okay, he got removed from Doge, and then he's going and running his companies, right? So I mean, it feels like a pretty easy out if they want that. I don't know. I also feel like the relationship between like Trump and Elon has been, I guess, a little bit strange lately. With him, always on TV and bringing his kid in, and kind of just a strange relationship going on. But maybe he's the fall guy. I don't know. What do you think, so?
I'm not sure about that at all. I think the idea is, I remember in the beginning, like Trump and Elon, they were in like this in the president's room in the Oval Office, and then a lot of people were upset about the idea that Elon Musk and his child were talking over Donald Trump. And I remember this entire like narrative was starting to like really catch flames. I think this is just like the dividends of like kind of this idea that Elon kind of took over for Trump. And I think Trump's always been a little bit more, this is my show kind of thing.
Yeah, it feels like it's almost like there's times where Elon Musk like kind of takes too much of the show, and it's like you never want to overshadow the big dog, you know, at the end of the day. So
yeah, that makes sense. And I think another aspect of this is that since the Trump administration, the second one, there are more business people that are being involved in politics. I think David Sachs, who was or is the founding partner of a VC firm, who's also close to the Republican Party, he's been the crypto and AI czar. So, and he has announced certain good things, I suppose, for the Web3 community, or maybe not.
Wasn't he saying that I don't believe in Bitcoin anymore, or if you guys don't smarten up, you know, Bitcoin's going to be replaced by something else? And it's like I don't know. Well, as soon as he said that, I was just like, he has no concept of what he's talking about. And I don't know if it was in relation to innovation or something of that nature, but he literally tweeted that, like, oh, Bitcoin is going to be replaced by something else. And anyone who's been in the space for longer than 5 minutes knows that, okay, well, every other cryptocurrency in the top 10 has changed other than Bitcoin, right? That is the innovation, not all the other stuff. And so, I don't know. It's a weird thing.
Yeah. So what do you think about like more business people going into politics? Is it a good thing for you know the American people as a whole, or do you think it's some room for concern due to like conflict of interests?
I think it's exciting. I know like the idea is that the fear is the idea of they're gonna put into policies that only help their own businesses. But I think we've had such a long time with just career politicians, people that have just lived their whole lives just being elected and then only worrying about their next term of election. At least now we have this idea of people that have kind of like built something for themselves for the most part. Like Howard Lutnick, for example, he was the owner of like the asset management firm Cantor when 9/11 happened, right? And his entire office was like one of the biggest hits of it.
That's the Commerce Secretary.
Yeah, right. And now he's running the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So like it's exciting that you have these hedge fund guys. I'm a big fan of David Sachs. Actually, I used to listen to his All In podcast all the time. It's just exciting, you know, these people that have innovative ideas. They don't have to have like a broken telephone to get the bureaucrats to kind of put something into place. They are the bureaucrats now. And I think it's just exciting to see what will this happen? Where will this go? It's an experiment.
Okay, amazing. And I think now we'll talk to a related topic about businessmen taking leadership positions. And that is the Canadian election. And I think Canada has never been in the global news before. But obviously now with the tariffs, with Canada hitting back at the US for counter tariff measures. And last week, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, basically said that traditional Canada and US relationship is over. And now obviously there's an election. And Matt, I think, yeah, just talk to us more about like who is this guy, Mark Carney? Why did he become the Prime Minister? And what's going to happen next?
Well, my understanding was he's been involved in a bunch of different businesses, involved with the Bank of England. Also interesting, he has citizenship like over in the UK and here, and now he's Canadian Prime Minister, but he doesn't have a seat, which is interesting as well, which is kind of unheard of. So, and then Trump apparently likes it. So I don't know. It's just feels like it's kind of a weird situation where, and then. It's also a weird situation because like in Canada we have the two parties, right? We have the Liberals, we have the Conservatives. Yeah, there's a couple other ones like the Greens, NDP, but it's mainly just the Liberals and Conservative. And while Trudeau was still in power, it seemed like even the Liberals themselves really hated Trudeau. But now, you know, apparently just replacing Trudeau, now there's a bunch of people that have a bunch of support towards Carney. And so was their issue really just Trudeau? So I don't know. I feel like we're in a weird spot where we're on the cusp of an election. The polls say that Carney is way ahead. Is this just a similar situation to Kamala Harris being way ahead in the polls, and it's actually going to swing the other way?
Yeah. So talk more about Mark Carney for people who don't know him, and what do you think about the state of the Canadian politics is right now?
Yeah, I think Mark Carney overall is a very seasoned, like, just politician, like in terms of his resume. The one thing I will give like the Liberal Party credit for is in January it felt like they were free falling. I think the polls were saying the biggest Conservative win in the history of Canada, and now they're much more likely to actually come into office. So I think in terms of like the recovery on that end, Liberals did well. Mark Carney, as an individual though, whenever I listen to him speak, nothing feels genuine. I remember he was talking in a bar, and he was explaining this idea that we sell the most semiconductors to USA. Maybe one day they'll just stop showing up. First of all, Canada doesn't sell semiconductors to USA. And secondly, just the way like he kind of says some of this stuff, it feels eerie. Some of his policies are always kind of like hypocritical of like his stances beforehand. Overall, I'm always on the side of like lower taxes, and he's been so cagey, this idea of the carbon tax. And for listeners that don't know, Canada is one of the only countries in the world that we are carbon positive. So we have more trees that absorb the carbon than the amount we produce. And we are also one of the only countries in the world that have a carbon tax. And that's really, for the past couple of years, has really detrimentally hurt our economy. Our dollar has weakened to, I think, the US dollar by a pretty large margin. And so I think overall, like me personally, I do think there is a time for change. But if there was somebody on the Liberal Party that maybe could be good, I would assume probably Mark Carney is the best candidate.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think about taxation under Liberal policies? Because we do know, aside from the carbon tax hit a pause for about a month, there was also a capital gains hike that was proposed, and then the CRA started collecting them, and then now it's an election and they killed it. So tell our listeners who don't know about this why that's important.
Well, I think it's pretty strange when, so Canada Revenue Agency, CRA is the equivalent to the IRS in Canada, when they start collecting on a policy that is not even passed in government, it kind of feels like they're kind of going rogue a little bit. So, I mean, that's concerning. Honestly, like, what they really should be doing is just lowering taxes, right? Imagine you actually just lower taxes across the board in Canada. You have people from the United States that are fed up with tariffs that start, instead of talent from Canada, just exiting. Like, we have a huge brain drain problem. I have a ton of friends from Waterloo that went to Waterloo. Now they're working in the States, right? Why don't we bring those people back? Why don't we bring talent back into Canada, lower taxes here? People are fed up with tariffs down south, come up north, lower taxes. That seems like a no-brainer. I know that Pierre Poilievre is planning to lower taxes, but my whole thing with Carney, too, is he removed the carbon tax. I don't understand why Canada ever needed a carbon tax, right? Okay, yeah, we're making a big dent in carbon compared to China. But so he axes the tax, and then he puts it back on for the industrial sector. So what was the point?
But the tax was never eliminated. It was just paused, right? It was passed in Parliament. However, he's just doing a temporary measure to pause the carbon tax for a month, perhaps. I'm not sure, just for the election. Mm-hmm. No clue, right? But I think the challenges of this country, Canada, and also just like all the Western countries, is that taxation is going higher. Same in the US. I was just reading the Bloomberg today, and they were saying the Republicans are potentially putting up a new tax bracket for people making over $1 million. And the tax will be between 40 to 50%.
You know, income tax didn't even exist before World War I. Like, they introduced it, and they introduced it for the 1%. Well, then they inflated the currency so far that everyone's in that tax bracket now. Mm-hmm. So they go and put it in for the 1%. And then how long is it before everyone's in that tax bracket because they inflated the currency?
Yeah, and I heard the corporate tax was 50% before they brought it down to about 20% today, maybe lower. So corporate tax is going down. Personal income tax is going up. So is this just like robbing the poor and funding the rich?
I mean, well, it seems like it's something like that, but at the end of the day, everyone becomes poor. And the other thing, too, is that, okay, if you're in that tax bracket, now you have more incentive to have capital flight, to leave the United States. If taxes go up in Canada, you have incentive to leave Canada. And you also have this curve that exists. And I don't remember if it was the Netherlands or another country in Europe that did this, but I think it was Norway. It was Norway. Norway, basically, they were saying, we need to tax the rich substantially more. And they hiked the taxes up for the ultra rich substantially, mm-hmm. and they were expecting to make, I don't know, 300 billion more in taxes that year. But there was so much capital flight that they actually ended up with less in taxes. So there's this curve where if you tax too much, there will be capital flight that will leave that country. Yeah. So
don't you know politicians know this? Why do they keep doing hiking taxes?
I think it's almost an addiction to a certain point, right? Like, taxes aren't going down. Like, once government starts getting money, they're able to spend it how they want. We don't have like direct democracy; we have representation democracy, right? So if I elect my constituent, he'll just do what he sees fit for the greater people. But sometimes you're not going to do that. You're going to do what like you think is just better for like you yourself in those kind of situations. And the idea is like tax revenue. It kind of keeps like citizens at a bay as well. I think what Matt was saying is the idea that the 1% are able to do capital flight with ease. You know, they're able to pay for the lawyers, accountants, everyone else that you kind of need to get that structure to actually go. But the middle class, like the lower class, they don't have access to those kind of resources. So for them, they can't really do much besides just stay in the country where they're raised. And so that's why I think the overall goal always becomes that's where you want to capture the tax from.
Right. And yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think there are options. Like, I think people might not know. Like, yes, absolutely, for the 1%, capital flight is easy. But for anyone who works remotely, like, there are options for being able to get out of the country, right? Paraguay, right? 0% for foreign income tax, 0% capital gains. You can get temporary residency there, and the cost of living is super low. So there are, like, if you're willing to go out of Canada, there are options for you. But it takes a certain amount of work for someone to go through that entire process to figure out, where do they want to live outside of Canada or outside the United States.
Right. And that isn't that what digital nomad is about? That you're living outside of your home country for potentially like forever, for many years, and then you're not paying those high taxes. Some people go to Bali in Indonesia, some people go somewhere else, Thailand. Is that part of the escape, Matt, or do you think that's just a temporary thing for most people?
Well, I think there's a group of people who are just tired of it and they want to be digital nomads and they want to be free and they want to be able to live wherever they want. And I think that's growing. More and more people are able to work online, but that's not, it's not possible for everybody. You can't have everyone in Canada being a digital nomad or in the United States being digital nomad. It doesn't make any sense. So, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, back in the day, people used to fight. Like, what was it? The American Revolution happened after 3% tax and now we're sitting here being taxed 50%, right? And the other thing too is, you have more and more capital flight that occurs. Well, who's left? Well, everyone who just accepted the tax. So what happens if you increase it more?
Yeah. So what are your thoughts about like taxation in general, and for young people who are just enter the workforce or a couple years who feel pretty burdened by the tax, that they're being taxed and they feel like they're not getting equally in return. And I think this is like a Western democracy are facing this issue in just about every country in the Western world. So what are your thoughts about this phenomenon?
I think that right there hits the point that we're starting to notice a lot is, and this I think for Canada, USA specifically, it's one of the worst deltas. There was like a happiness report I was reading where people above the age of 50 in Canada and USA, they're amongst the happiest like in the world. People under 30, Canada and USA, I think USA was 58th, Canada was 62nd in the entire world. And then that delta between the people that were like much older versus like much younger is the biggest on the planet. Like, Canada is the worst in the world for this. And you start thinking why. It's because people that like got older, they're asset rich. So they don't pay those taxes because you can kind of hold on to your assets, borrow off of those. Versus people just coming into the market, they don't really have those assets. So you have a job, those taxes get withheld before you even get the money. So you don't really have any control over that at all. And I think we're in this situation. I think what Matt was saying a little bit earlier about that brain drain problem. Like, I think we all went to Waterloo or like around there, and we're noticing some of our closest friends are all in the US now. And if it's not going to be the US, it's going to be another country. But it's going to be a country that incentivizes people to come, incentivizes people to build, and just gives them like an open road and say, do with it what you can.
Yeah. For our US listeners, just explaining a bit why they're moving. Is it for the dollar, USD? Is it for a higher pay?
I think it's a combination. It's the idea that one, the US dollar is just so much stronger than the Canadian dollar. People trust it more in the long term as well. And then on top of that, it is the pay as well. USA's economy is just so much like larger, and it's growing at a higher rate than Canadian economy as well. And so then it becomes a hard analysis for you to do on a cost benefit basis outside of being patriotic. If you have the opportunity to go to the US, for the most part, it becomes hard to justify staying in Canada.
I just wanted to add on to that. Like, what seems wild to me is, like, you were talking about 50 to 70-year-olds being like super happy in Canada and 30-year-olds not be. Well, why did that happen? Well, because they have so many, a large percentage of their net worth is in real estate because real estate went up so much and people were parking their wealth into that. Well, why did that occur? Well, there was easy access to capital because mortgage rates went down dramatically. So then, the cost of borrowing in order to buy real estate was easy. So we've now ended up with a generation where, the storage of value is is in real estate. So, I mean, this makes the perfect case for, fix the money, fix the world, because, think of it, because if people stop, if real estate stops being so incredibly valuable, and yes, of course, there's always going to be scarcity for, a plot of land, right? But instead of housing costs being, 20 years or 30 years of your annual income, they're literally giving out 30-year mortgages now.
Yeah.
Instead of it being, 30, years of your annual income, and instead it's like 10 years or 5 years, like it used to be way back in the 1940s and 50s, then maybe that, the happiness index can go back up, and people are actually, comfortable actually getting a house. And then maybe that also solves the issue with the population crisis, right? Like the actual birth rates in Canada are incredibly low because, people don't want to have kids if they can't even buy a house, for God's sake.
Yeah, and I think a huge issue is this is also representation in the political system, right?
Yeah.
And I think same for the US, same for many countries, is that older people go out and vote. Young people don't go out and vote. And older people have more political sway over different policies of their local representative. Do you write to your local representative? Probably not, right? But old people do that all the time. So older people do that all the time. Boomers do that all the time. So there has been this argument is that they're the ones that the political class cares about because they're the ones that go out and vote. So Soham, what do you think about this phenomenon? And is it time for change in the system?
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think the one thing we did notice though, and this was in the US election, that younger people did start coming in. They start coming in hives. I think most young people were kind of on the side of the Trump administration. They didn't want to see Kamala Harris in office, and people came out. And I think we talked about this in the last episode too, was the idea that even Polymarket was saying Kamala Harris was going to win, but then it just turned out not to be true. So hopefully that does happen. This idea too, that young people do start banding together, kind of like standing up for what they believe in. But I do think for a long time, young people have just kind of been pushed down saying, oh, wait till you're older, you'll understand. Like you don't really know what's going on. I think this is the first time we're seeing like maybe people will start taking that stand. It's exciting.
Yeah, and I think the world has changed for the worse for young people with AI. So if you are already retired, AI is not going to really do anything for you other than the central bank declare bankruptcy, which I don't think that's going to happen. So there's pretty much nothing that concerns older people who retirees, right, who's collecting their checks. Of course, there's still issues with them, but comparatively much less than people who just enter the workforce, people who are in their careers and feeling that they've been robbed by this like taxation system. Matt, what are your thoughts about like all this?
Well, I think there's some concerns for retirees, like if you have too much inflation of the currency, then, or say, like here in Canada, right, you have retirees that are earning their pension in CAD, right? And then, their purchasing power is way down in comparison to USD, right? Yeah. So they invested for years. But I think in general there's a lot of young people that are literally at the point of, I'm never going to own a home.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Are you kidding me? Just buy some Bitcoin. But anyhow, it's sad because I think if you have a generation like that, it doesn't take long for, our population to become like Japan, where the birth rates are way down and the entirety of the population comes entirely from immigrants, right? Yeah, Canada was built on immigrants, right? So was the United States. But you can't have a country that doesn't have a birth, that has a declining birth rate like crazy. That's terrible.
Yeah, and speaking of birth rate, I mean, obviously the U.S. Trump administration has been very, I guess, harder on the border, on the southern border, and I think there's obviously much less crossings towards the U.S. and also legal migration. I'm not sure if that's impacted, but obviously everyone who's in the U.S. they have this feeling of that. Okay, immigration has changed forever. Right, and there's like less, and the population growth is probably going to slow down. So obviously that was the issue on the ballot for most Americans. What do you think of the new trend globally? Actually, not just in the U.S. Right, Germany just had their far right party gaining about 20% of the total votes, right? Which is the media says it's concerning, right? Obviously, I guess. It's concerning for the point that they're super anti-immigration. And just now, like across the world, there's this anti-immigration rhetoric. So is that like part of the deglobalization that the US president is looking for? Like, what are your thoughts about this trend?
I think that should be split up into two situations. I think one thing in terms of like the verbiage that gets used a lot with immigration that doesn't appeal to me is, you know, if you're coming into a country illegally, I don't think it should even be called illegal immigration, because either you make it allowed that anyone can just come into the country, or you enforce the law, right? It makes no sense to me, this idea of like illegal immigration, like allowing that, like protesting in that sense. If you do want to just allow open borders, that's your right as like citizens of the country, right? But it should either be taken away from the law or enforced. Is like the first part I would say. And then the second part on like immigration on like a higher level, I think what we've noticed a lot is a lot of the Western countries, because like again, like the minimum wage is starting to increase a lot, and labor pressure has become very heavy for like, you know, like low skilled labor, and such as like working as a cashier, things that almost anyone can really do, that like we used to back in our day like do in high school, right? Like when you're like 16 years old, kind of those kind of jobs. And so then the replacement's been, where else can you get the human labor from? And the solution was immigration. So you see mass immigration everywhere. I think Canada was like a big constituent in this too. They brought in a lot of immigrants, and probably notice that, like, for example, at Tim Hortons, you'll see a lot of immigrants working there because that's where you get the labor.
Matt, what do you think?
Well, I think like it's wild to me that in Canada there's like 5 million people whose visas are expiring next year, right? Like, how did we import? We're a country of what, 40 million people?
Yeah.
How did we import 5 million people during the span of COVID? What are you talking about? and I like, the other thing too that I think is like frustrating is that it used, like, the whole point of immigration was to bring skilled people into the country, and that's no longer the case, right? You used to need to have like certain skill set, and that used to be valued, and now it actually feels like it's the opposite, right? Where actually the people that are more skilled are having a harder time actually getting in, and the people who are unskilled and have dependents or are dependent on someone else are actually having an easier time getting in. So it's almost feels like it's by design. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think in the U.S., I think the big argument was Biden administration's CBP-1 app, which I think allowed anyone crossing the border illegally to obtain a valid work authorization. I think that was the big tipping point for most voters. They don't want that. They hated that. And they feel like that drives down wages. So does that similar what you just said?
Well, I was just going to add on to that and say that, well, it's wild to me that you had so much illegal immigration in the United States, and then there were several states that were pushing for no ID required to vote. Explain those two things to me, and explain to me how that doesn't result in incredible voter fraud, and explain to me how it's racist. I want to know that. I would like to know how it's racist to require voter ID. I don't even remember your question.
I just think it's a very sensitive topic for voter ID. I think the argument is that a certain segment of the population may not carry their ID every day with them, which I find it strange. And on the other side, I think in states like California, anyone can get a state ID, no matter what's your visa status. No matter where you came from, you can get a state ID, you can get a driver's license without being a citizen, a permanent resident, aka a green card, or even like a study visa or work visa, which is absurd, I guess, in a way, not on a humanitarian side. But I think that was driving the cultural divide between two different generations, and, driving down wages, I think, for most people. That's the argument.
Well, I think it seems wild to me that, in theory, ourselves as Canadians, we could, fly down to California in the last election. Like, basically nothing stopping us. I understand that, people might have arguments for that, but it's also like, okay, just remember to bring your ID with you on voting day, or vote ahead of time. I don't know. That seems like a pretty reasonable thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, I think we should also talk about some business news of the week. I think something is happening in Romania. And I think, Matt, you were bringing up something that's happening about Romania.
Oh, well, I guess with the Canadian election coming up, there was some weird stuff happening with Romania recently, where basically their election was canceled because the guy who was getting the most. So in Romania, basically there's many Romanians living around the world that have immigrated to Canada or United States or wherever, and so they're able to vote basically ahead of time. So the election started and people started voting in Australia, Romanians that were in Australia. And they noticed that one of the candidates, I guess the candidate that the European Union didn't want to win, was had a huge lead basically very, very early on in the polls and also in the voting process. And so elections were canceled. Right, and it's like, okay, well, that seems a little bit strange. And they said, oh, it's a Russian interference. It's like, what are you talking about? So now they've made it such that candidate that was way ahead is now no longer able to run, and now they're doing new elections. So okay, let's compare that to Canada. We had several potential candidates for the Liberal leadership that were trying to run, and they were deemed ineligible for whatever reasons.
And whoever wins this leadership is going to be the prime minister, essentially.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for adding that. Who were deemed ineligible. I mean, in essence, you're basically just choosing. It's a democracy, but you're choosing which candidates are allowed to run, and then the population goes and decides between the two evils. So how is that democracy?
Yeah, is that democracy?
I think some would say that's exactly what the two-party system was made to show. Sort of.
Yeah, it sounds like some authoritarian regimes where like it was pre-selected to whoever there's one candidate to run.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's definitely concerning. I think on a global stage, I think we are entering like a very fluid time in our lives where just things is happening every day and people are just, oh, screw it, we don't really care anymore.
We'll call it the fluid democracy.
Yeah, we're in the fluid democracy phase. So yeah, a little bit more on the business news. I think there's like, I think Apple as of April 3rd has tanked by 10% roughly. Mm-hmm. So I think part of that is the tariffs, but also like many investors are very disappointed in Apple about their slow rollout in artificial intelligence, mm-hmm. Especially given that the Siri update was delayed indefinitely. Like people don't know when it's going to be plugged on, and the Apple Intelligence was a flop. And yeah, I guess Soham, like why was there a flop, and why do you think there was those delays, and why couldn't Apple get their things together?
I think culturally, Apple's always been a little bit slower. Like the joke would be whatever happened in Android 5 years ago is what Apple will release now. But I think the reason why users were okay with accepting that was because you knew it would come out polished. You knew it would come out great. I think the problem with investors now, and me as an Apple user, like I got the newest iPhone and it crashes on me. And it makes no sense to me when I'm like paying more than I would pay for my own MacBook for this phone, yep. And it crashes. And so I think that's where like the problem is starting to become is Apple is losing their polish. Apple is losing their pure ecosystem. Like a lot of apps and everything have become like very critical of Apple's like App Store. What they're charging. Apple's been having to defend a lot of lawsuits there. And so with all this coming in, I don't think Apple just had the brain power to be able to like go into AI completely the way like a ChatGPT can, where that's the pure focus. Like Google, for example, I think right now Gemini 2.5 is the best model out there. That's because Google's been like on AI since the early 20s, if not earlier, right? And so I think Apple just never started with AI. They're starting from scratch now. And I don't know if they'll be able to like catch up with some of the other LLMs or anything else that's going in the market.
Yeah, and I think the photo app is terrible.
Yeah.
For a start.
Agree. Well, I think the other thing too is like Apple's been, they used to be first.
Yeah.
Right? The iPhone completely changed the industry. I mean, they were first back in the day on the personal computer.
iPod was amazing.
iPod, yeah. Like they used to be first on things, and now they're not really first anymore. They're kind of last. I tried to set a reminder the other day using Siri. Right? Just, remind me at 7 p.m. to do X, Y. Sorry, I didn't get that. Like it's just not helpful at all. But they have such an ecosystem,
Yeah.
Text messages. You don't want to be green, don't be green. And I feel like that's so ingrained into like teenagers and stuff. Like they don't want to be the one. I heard statistics of like the teenagers that buy Apple products is like ridiculously high because they don't want to be the one friend out that has a really weird Android one.
But why are they flopping on AI, Matt? You think?
I don't.
Is it the company culture? You think it's just they're too big? They don't care anymore. They're just like, we're just making money by doing nothing. Why do you think there is?
I don't know. Like maybe they've been more of a hardware company like for a long time. Like whereas Google has always been in, and they've always been deep in machine learning. Right. I don't know. Why do you think?
Right. I think the culture had just been very bureaucratic, perhaps. And I think the iPhone 10, I guess, looks exactly the same as iPhone 17,
Yeah.
which just came out. And I think that it doesn't make any sense. I think the latest iPhone, the tagline was literally Apple Intelligence, and it was complete flop. And up until today, Siri does not work for Apple Intelligence. It does not work. Nobody I know uses Siri at all, right? Like even Alexa, which I don't think is that smart, gets most of the queries right? I mean, obviously OpenAI is much nicer, but obviously costs more. It just doesn't make any sense. And I feel like there's no reason for me to upgrade to anything. And maybe that was their strategy. And I totally get it. And I feel like they're just very comfortable because there's no disruptors, right? Come on, like China has like this Xiaomi and they have Huawei, but that's going for like the developing countries. So they feel like, oh, we're safe, we're locked in.
So why don't you switch to Android, George?
Yeah, I have not switched to Android. I started, I guess, I started my phone journeys many years ago in Android, and I really loved it. And I think it was just because this like prestige at the time about like, oh, Apple, right? I played like a zombie game, Plant vs Zombies on iPhone 4 when I was like, I don't know, 10 or something, and I was like blown away by, okay, like a piece of machine can do that, right? I don't have that excitement anymore about like just like any Apple product, right? Quite frankly, I used to carry like my iPod everywhere where I go because I just think it's such a cool mini device. Like I can press a button and it's gonna go to the next song. Very rarely do I get like that amazed anymore, and oftentimes it's by some software product updates. It's rarely on hardware, and maybe it's even rare on Apple. So I feel like the reason why I'm not switching is I use a Mac for my work. I use Mac to code, and I feel like it's and I build mobile apps, obviously, like we build mobile apps on Apple. So sometimes I just need to use it to, get locked in. I guess that's really the point. It's less about the iMessage stuff for me personally. It's more just about like you form the habit. It's hard to get out of.
Yeah. I think Apple Silicon is definitely the one thing that's still chugging the train away. I think before that, outside of AirPods, there's been almost zero innovation. Like they dropped the Apple Car, they dropped so much. They're just dropping the ball on.
Yeah, and the Vision Pro, which have you tried, Matt?
I've not tried it.
Yeah, no.
Okay, nobody has tried it.
Expensive.
Yeah, I get so blurry. I have this like migraine thing, so every time I plug something onto my face, I feel, oh god, so like uncomfortable. So I tried it. I really liked it, but would I pay $4,000 for it? I don't think so.
Probably not.
And Meta is doing much better on this, even though I guess Meta was being blamed for like spending billions of dollars on this like AR VR thing. So Han, what are your thoughts about like Meta? Because nobody talks about it that much.
I think people really underestimate what Meta's going to do. I remember I was listening to Joe Rogan, the Joe Rogan podcast where Mark Zuckerberg was on it, and he was explaining his like long-term vision for like what Meta will do is the idea of like contact lenses, so you can connect the internet while you see. And it sounds so, I guess, like Black Mirror-esque, like, like just so dystopian. But I really took a minute to think, and it does seem kind of trivial, the idea of you have to like use like your hands and everything to be able to like access the internet. Right? Like you have Elon coming out with Neuralink in so many different ways that the internet has become a basic necessity for humans at this point. And I think the idea becomes Meta already has their like Ray-Ban glasses to like have smart glasses.
Yeah, it's partnership with Ray-Ban. Smart.
And so now I think the next like real growth will be in this idea of like not even VR, but like actual just contact lenses that can connect to the internet and you can see it while I'm talking to you and things like that.
I think that's actually smart. Yeah, it's like, Matt, what do you think about like just in general this VR thing? I guess younger people maybe are using it more, younger than us, but people in their high school. But what do you think about this VR thing?
Well, did you see the advertisement on the table here? I feel like that's going to be the future. Like, I don't know. As soon as you said the contact lens, I was like, oh my God, the entire world becomes an advertising space.
Yeah.
You walk down the street, every street corner, every building, the entirety becomes an advertising center. So I think that's the Black Mirror version. I don't know. Honestly, I feel like VR, AR is still like 10 years away because we still have problems where, people have blurriness or people who have I have terrible eyes, right? So I need very strong prescriptions. So if I got the Apple Vision, I would have to get these thick lenses to go into it, and I don't really want to put that on top of my glasses. So many people wear glasses, 50% of the population, and so I feel like that's a really tough thing to get out. But maybe if Meta can make it cheap enough, then people are going to use it. But I think the reason like phones took off is because it was immediately useful, right? It's like, okay, this replaces my existing mobile phone and I'm going to use it right now. I don't think it's clear to people like, what am I going to use VR and AR for? What am I going to use it for? What am I going to use it for right now? It's going to be incredibly life-changing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like talking about immersions and games, do you think there's some sort of like market value for it? If something like the content is available, I think people will do it. Because think about like the most successful game in the last decade was Grand Theft Auto 5, right? And it was basically like a game building. It's like a world building. You have this world of, Los Santos, and you have like you can be whoever you want. You can buy properties, buy cars, play missions. I think that really attracts to not only just young people, but also like middle-aged folks as well. I think that's something that surprises me even onto this day. Like I personally don't play any games, but sometimes I do. I watch YouTube gamers play it, right? I feel like this sort of satisfaction. So what do you think about this like gaming industry in general? Because some of our listeners might be, maybe it's good to buy stocks in like Take-Two or the other big players out there.
Yeah. I will say one thing. I think the way I kind of view what gaming will become is a little bit different and more nuanced. It's this idea that for the longest time we've had to have like a world building that another developer did, right? I think we'll get to a point where we have strong enough like AI that the world building can be done with just like what you want, like with like your thoughts, like your own prompting. And then, for example, I think like people stop watching television and now they kind of go on their phone on TikTok, the For You page, right? That's kind of what your television is. It's like very private. It's like it's only like your own thing. Like my For You page will be completely different from yours. And so then I think the idea is like, I don't know if gaming will be this like cultural thing, the way when we grew up watching TV, we all were waiting for the next episode of SpongeBob and we talked about it in class. Now it's like that doesn't really happen anymore. It's like, you'll watch like your own show on Netflix. You'll watch whatever. I think gaming is kind of heading into that direction too, of like very like a monocultural point.
Yeah. Speaking of Netflix, I guess many people were bullish about Netflix in 2017. I don't think this is going to work. But I think Netflix took off by like a significant margin in terms of stock prices. And I think Netflix model was that we have $100 million. We're going to throw it at different parts of the world to see what sticks. And I think their model was essentially moving production away from LA to other parts of the world, like Korea, Mexico, somewhere else. I don't know, somewhere else that does like cheap movie productions. They don't hire the first-rated stars. They hire stars that have been maybe about middle tier in terms of like the star value. So I think that's an interesting trend. Like Matt, do you think that applies to the wrestling industry as well as we go through this AI trend? Is it more just like going offshore, hiring folks who are outside of major democracies and saving costs? Is that the trend that's already happening?
Well, I think everyone thought everything becomes more global, and then I have tariffs in the United States. So much for that. I did want to say one thing on Netflix, because I think like, back in the day, they were more of a tech company, right? It was like, $5 a month for Netflix, and they had to do a ton of work to make sure that their technology was better than anyone else's at being able to stream, and they did a great job doing that. And now it's a weird situation where they have so many competitors that now it's more about the content, right?
Yeah.
They need to have better content than everyone else. So yeah, I mean, I think they did a great job, doing Squid Games in Korea and trying to get international content, because like that's what they need to do to survive. They must continue to create the best content out there that people are going to, exclusively subscribe to Netflix. And as a developer, I feel very weird about this because, humans would optimally have like a protocol for content that they'd be able to utilize and stream over the internet. This seems very far from that. It is what it is. Capitalism exists.
Yeah. So what do you think about the Netflix model in general? And is there something you like about it? You doesn't like about it? What do you think is going to happen in the next couple of years?
One thing I want to connect back, just like what we were talking about beforehand, I will say Apple, I think, is also doing a great job with Apple TV. I think like they've been churning out like content that a lot of people are watching.
Yeah, it's always this thing where it's like the one show that people keep talking about.
Severance. I think that's
it was Severance. Yeah, people kept talking about it. It's like, it's only on Apple TV. And it's like, okay, well, frig, I've got Netflix, I've got Prime. My roommate is Crave. Like, it's like
that's me as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it will get to a point where people will subscribe to Apple TV, For me, it just hasn't hit that point yet. I guess maybe that's just with one show. Maybe there's like 3, 4 shows.
Mhm.
And I can binge. That's could be worth a subscription price, which is not a lot.
Yeah. I think in terms of that, it just takes time to build your content library, right? But I think that's like the one thing Apple is like doing strongly. Because I think they copied exactly what Netflix did back in the day when they started investing in House of Cards and other games. And then to your original point of Netflix's business model expanding worldwide, I think that right now can finally start being proven to be like useful outside of just like good quality shows like with Squid Games, which you can then dub. I think with like AI, you can actually dub it much more clean, and you can have like the actor's real voice. I think like as an anime watcher, like almost anyone will get mad at you if you're watching the English dub, right? And so like the true Japanese version. I think we're at a point now where like that English dub can still have that same like feel of the character and things like that. And that's really when I think Netflix's like bet on international like media will really take off.
I just had a thought. Like, what do you guys think happens when AI gets like Netflix's entire model is based on content, but what happens when AI becomes sufficiently advanced such that anyone is able to generate content like on the fly?
I think the problem still becomes it doesn't matter if you can generate something. The point is like I think people underestimate like the value of the wrapper, the value of the UI. Sometimes I have like shows on Prime I like, but I just like Netflix's UI a little bit more. I think that's sticky. I think that's stickier than like people kind of give it credit for.
Yeah.
And so in that situation, what will happen if people can create their own content? You could see Netflix kind of like maybe inching closer towards how YouTube does it, where maybe you can produce like your own content onto the site, with like a ranking system and things along those ways.
Or maybe it's personalized, right? Like they put out content, but they know what you like.
Yeah.
And so, you might watch House of Cards, but it might be a different, your House of Cards might be different from my House of Cards. The ending might be different, like depending on like the individual. I don't know. That's an idea.
I think it's already happening.
I think they tried that with like Black Mirror, right? The game version of it.
Oh yeah. But that was also weird because you had to keep clicking through it.
Yeah.
This could happen automatically, but I don't know. But that's so weird too because then it gets you away from the shared experience.
I think we are getting away from that just overall. I don't think that's.
Well, I've just like seen. I mean, we had the whole thing with, ChatGPT, and they improved their image model, and everyone suddenly was doing everything in Ghibli style, which is awesome. That's so fun. And then you also have the ability to generate videos too using Sora.
Yeah.
So the ability to create marketing material, create content, put it out there. Anyone can be a content creator now. Anyone can be an animator. The ability to do that. So the most creative people are going to be able to build an audience and create things. And that's going to, maybe that even becomes stronger. But so then, do you have like a certain part of the media, certain part of the attention that just goes to this type of content where the best people are able to create it? But then on the other hand, you have, a urge that people have for like reality, like where they want to see those old TV shows. So I think maybe you have both extremes that come to fruition, where you have the entirely generated content that people want the best of, but people also yearn for, hey, a normal human interaction. I don't know.
And just for the numbers, so for OpenAI's new image generation, so I think they signed up 1 million new users in a single hour after the new release. According to their COO, over 130 million users have generated more than 700 images since March 25th. So what are your thoughts?
I think it was Sam, he tweeted this himself. He was saying that when GPT-3 first came out, it took them 5 days to get to that 1 million users. Now they're doing it in an hour. Things change fast. And I think this is really proven that this business model is something here to stay. I think everyone at the very least has the curiosity to go through with ChatGPT to see like how powerful this is. And I think we're going to see now like human creation, like to see like where does this take you when like the hurdles of like being able to be a good drawer aren't there. Like how many other, I forget the designer of Studio Gilby's name, but how many versions of him are out there that have an idea in their head? And then I think it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, I think it makes Canva obsolete.
Yeah, well, what do you guys think is more defensible? Do you think the models, like, ChatGPT 3.5 or Claude 3.5, 3.7, do you think the models are more defensible or the wrappers?
The wrappers.
It's a good question. Depends on. I think the models, although I do know where it's gonna end up. I think it's a race to the bottom, just like what everything else, kind of does. But I mean, isn't Uber and Lyft kind of racist about them? But they're still around today, sort of.
Well, how many? Well, there's Uber, there's Lyft. Who else is there? There's Bolt.
There were more, and I think I was talking more globally, right? There was different types of Ubers, different countries. In China, they had Didi, and then they had Uber, and then they had like 50 other types of ride sharing. And now it's kind of like Didi just kind of like does everything a little bit. So it's not like they would just all go bankrupt as well, I guess.
But like, okay, you go to New York, what are your options? Okay, Uber, Lyft. You go to Las Vegas, what are your options? Uber, Lyft. SF, same thing. You go to Paraguay, what are your options? Uber and Bolt. Okay, well that's a different one. Lyft's not there. You go to China, okay, yeah, you're using Didi. But like they've managed to lock down New York and like most of the United States. And it's not like Bolt's coming in. It's not like Didi's coming into the United States.
Right.
So they do have a monopoly on certain regions, but not worldwide.
Wouldn't you say OpenAI's platform is basically a wrapper by itself?
Because a wrapper on AGI?
Even the platform like ChatGPT.com, that's a platform, that's a wrapper by itself. It's wrapping multiple different underlying LLMs, right? And then it wraps them together into its own platform. But that's still a wrapper.
Yeah.
So I would say wrapper wins. Wrapper will get whoever gets the most users. If the 700 million images thing is like real, which I'm assuming it is. It's a huge leap compared to Claude and the other players, right? Google might be the only one that can be against them because Google has more users. Mm-hmm. Google pushes me the Gemini updates to my workplace accounts. Before they were saying, oh, $22 per user per month. And I was like, F you, I'm not doing that. Right? I'm already paying you so much. And then around December, they made it free for my workplace. And now they say, okay, Notebook LM is free as well. And it's automatically added to your Google workplace account.
Well, I feel like everything's a wrapper, right? Like, and everything will be wrappers, right? There will be wrappers upon wrappers.
Yeah.
ChatGPT is a wrapper upon the AI models, and then Cursor is a wrapper on top of ChatGPT. Bitcoin is just a wrapper on energy, right? Like, everything else. And I think that like everyone's like, oh, well, problem with AI is hallucinations, right? And which is a big problem. Well, then you have another AI that, so you have the AI that writes the code as an agent, and you have another AI that reviews the PR, like that's trained on different things, and then like you're basically creating these agents that are just reviewing each other's code or reviewing whatever each other is doing, just like humans do, which is bizarre.
And I think a big thing was like Cursor AI, which I'm sure many of the listeners have heard about. It's basically this AI agent that can code for you on your behalf. So I think they charge about $20 to $40 per user per month, and their ARR, which is annual recurring revenue, has reportedly hit $200 million. Mm-hmm. And this company is only 2 years old, perhaps even less.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you about like AI agent, AI wrappers, and the underlying LLM builders?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what we were talking before, like with the vibe coders. Like, for example, I can't code at all. Using Cursor, I was able to make a functional app to a certain extent. The one that you can see something, it's working, you can click stuff through. I think that really starts becoming powerful. And the idea of the wrapper, I think that becomes good is, I think any IDE that you're going to be downloading anyways, you get used to like what it looks like. You get used to like, oh, where something is, where a button is, and that becomes sticky. And so when it comes to like whichever LLM you can kind of plug into Cursor, you don't really care about that too much as long as the intelligence is there, right? And so you care more about like the visual feel of it and things along those lines.
Yeah.
So I actually disagree. And in fact, I agreed with you until yesterday.
Okay.
So I've been using Cursor forever, and I was like, and people were saying like things about, Windsurf's really good too. And I was like, okay, well, I'm already in Cursor. Cursor's really good. It works for me. And then I saw a tweet of a software engineer that like recently got canned.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't know what to do. And then Gary Tan like retweeted him and was like, hey man, you need to use the proper machinery, like use Windsurf, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh damn, well he's really harping on Windsurf. Maybe I should try it. So I downloaded it. And like, yeah, it's a super similar interface. Some aspects just felt like more intuitive. So now I'm actually kind of I'm trying to decide between them.
Yeah.
So, if it's just a wrapper that's doing the same thing, then I feel like it's really easy. Like the switching cost is like not that high. If someone has subscribed to something, them going and subscribing to another thing that does the same thing, it's a really low switching cost.
So the brand doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think so. And unless they're doing something that's a 10x improvement. If they're both doing the same thing, then I feel like it's a really easy switching cost. But I think the key there is if you can build your business and you can build something unique into it that no one else can do, or you just keep improving on the UI substantially, people are going to continue doing that, and not that many people will switch. So I don't know, it's a hard game too, because it also means that more incumbents can come in. Who's to stop someone else from creating an alternative to Cursor that's cheaper using like XYZ models instead? So
and Matt, I guess what has changed since like the Web 2 era? Like let's say like Salesforce, right? I mean, Salesforce was like a successful CRM because it connects everything for your enterprise systems. But there are also other CRM that I personally find useful. But Salesforce is the biggest one. So you think that's no longer the case for like the future?
Well, I think there's just an opportunity for customization of everything, right? People don't have whatever software you could dream up that would help your life, is easier to build now than it ever has been. So, if a particular business needs this widget or that widget for their particular use case, well, maybe, that code can be written substantially faster for them, or this other business needs something added for them. I think the age of customization of software is upon us. And I think it's exciting because it means that new businesses can be created. Businesses that were never possible before are now economical to be created in short periods of time. Are they all going to be created by vibe coders? Okay, probably not. Yeah. But a combination of skilled coders and AI, I think, can churn out a lot of code really quickly, because you're just, as a senior coder, you can go in there and you're basically reviewing the code of a junior to make sure it's good, to be able to push that out faster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do you think about the dynamics of software developers,
mm-hmm.
Basically software companies in this paradigm? Because even for me, my company obviously built software, and even I'm feeling a little bit under, people that were focused on a very niche sector, construction. Is that okay? What's stopping someone from building something similar in 2 years, right? So it's just this risk of being obsolete, perhaps, even though there's no fault of your own, and it's not happening right for us. But I mean, again, who else would say it's not going to happen in 2 years?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, same for Matt's company, same for everyone's company. So what are your thoughts about this new paradigm?
I'll say one thing. I think I'll draw a parallel to when MySpace and Facebook were fighting for who will be the social media. The way MySpace kind of approached it was be pure customization, right? Your entire page, you could have a background how you want, you could have buttons the way you want, just so much. You could have music playing, a lot of things like that, right? Pure customization. What ended up happening though is most people aren't really designers, right? Most people, when you go on their profile, it becomes clunky. It doesn't look the best, or things feel out of place, So if it's something personal, on your phone, when you are customizing on Android, for example, you're okay with it being a little bit messy because it's just for you. But if you have a company that's for more than just one person, I still think there has to be a polisher. There's somebody that's coming in there the way Facebook came in. It's a clean UI, a timeline that you can kind of use and kind of grow into and things along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And so I still think overall software, certain companies may be going lower, but overall there still will be winners that come out from this.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think? Because you're a software developer, CTO yourself, you write a lot of code, you see a lot of space.
I think, I hadn't thought of it that way, what you just said. So on, basically the fact that you need a polisher, I guess, for me, I always want to create things. So I'm, I will literally write code for things to be the way that I want them to be. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, most people aren't like that. But maybe they're more inclined to be because they can describe
mm-hmm.
what they want. And maybe it's the polisher that puts the, I think maybe we just have we have more of an economy or software that's created, which is a combination of polishers and creators, and it becomes easier and easier for more software to be created and more polishers to come in and make it easy for people. Mm-hmm. But okay, do I think something like Spotify is going to change dramatically? Okay, probably not. But I think something like dashboards, for traders, is going to change dramatically. Yeah, probably, because the cost of doing that and cost of creating those type of dashboards becomes much lower, and every trader is different. So yeah, I think for certain things it stays the same, and other things you have an explosion of customization, but it depends on the industry.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think we have covered a lot of things in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have more topics I want to talk about, but why don't we stay tuned for the next one? So yeah, thank you everyone for listening in to our podcast. Soham and I were thinking of launching a community very soon on Discord and on Twitter. and on the social media platforms. So if you like the episode, please subscribe and stay tuned to the updates. You can find our Twitter handles and communities in the description. Thank you.
Sounds good.